what we created. So we had a bank account, that's the object, and it had account number, balance, name, transactions, and we had get methods. We didn't have set methods because all these fields should be private, and we don't want to give access to the user to change anything after they create an account. So just like that, we have a constructor. We don't have a default constructor because we need this information for the user to be the account to be created. We have get methods. They can check all this information. They're not able to set it. We have a method called deposit, withdraw. That would just take out the money from the balance. And when they're doing withdraw, we got to make sure that they have enough money to withdraw. Then we let them withdraw it. And the toString method, just a string representation of what that looks like. So I'm actually going to run this and see what I get. Started with account number 1. My name is Usman, balance is 50. And what I try to do is I tried to withdraw $1,000. I didn't have enough, so it just showed me a message. I don't have enough. I don't have sufficient funds. So let's go ahead and create another object. If you wanted to, we could add more functions to this, but let's create another one, get you guys more practice, how to create object. What's the first thing we need to do to create an object? So I'm going to delete all this. What's the first thing we need to do? Somebody comes up to you and tells you, go ahead and create an object called rectangle. So we're going to create an object called rectangle. What's the first thing we need to do? If the class is named rectangle, yep. We put rectangle, yep. So we actually don't have a class called rectangle yet. And how would you do that? So let's create a new class. Yeah. So we need to create a new class. So I'm going to right click on the source, go to new, and go to Java class. And this is where I create an object class. So this is where I give it a name, and that would be rectangle. And I'm just going to call that rectangle and create a new class. So now I have an object called rectangle. So if I go back to my main, which is also the user in this case, and create the rectangle, I have an object called rectangle, but it doesn't do anything because it doesn't have any fields. It doesn't have any functionality. So I think everybody got that from last week. If I do this, or they have built-in functions, they're coming from the superclass. So what happens is this is going to be useful when we move forward with inheritance and polymorphism. So what happens is there's a generic class called object. All these objects are coming from that. So we have, I wish I had a pen and a whiteboard, but okay. So this is object right here. All these, every time you create an object in Java, they're coming from this object class. So we create a rectangle. So I'm going to call that rectangle. It's coming from that object class. It's coming from object class, and all the functions that's built into object class are inherited into this rectangle class automatically. So when we do rectangle dot, all these functions coming from the object class. It's actually not showing that up here before it was used to, but they're coming from object class. They're generic methods. They're not useful to us. We need to build these methods our own. We should add a constructor first, exactly. So we need to add a constructor, but before we add a constructor, the first thing we need to do, what's the thing we need to do before we add the constructor? Attributes and fields. So we need to add attributes and fields, exactly. So the height and the width, or for rectangle, I think it's length and a width. So in this case, we'll just go ahead and call that integer. Length, and yeah, we can also add a color. So color, we can call that a string. Yeah, so we can use the hex value. So if you add a color, we're actually not going to be drawing a rectangle. So for this example, I'm going to take out the color. But if you add the GUI object, GUI class into this, I think we're going to be working on it towards the end of this course. Then you can add a color, and you can actually draw out the actual rectangle. But right now, we're actually only creating the objects. We're not working with GUI. So I'm just going to stick with these two for right now. All right. So now we have the attributes, fields. Now what we can do is add the constructor. So the constructor, what happens in the constructor? What does the constructor do? That's the variables, defaults, exactly. So it assigns the values to these fields. So that's the only main purpose, not the only purpose, the main purpose of the constructor. So it constructs your object. So what it does is just constructs the object. So we have a rectangle, so I'm going to call that rectangle. And you don't actually need to add public or anything next to it. It's a constructor. Name of the class is fine, and it's going to take and sets the variables to defaults. Yeah, we can set the variables to defaults, or we can set the whatever the user passes in. So in this case, the user passing in the information, and we can just set it to new. So we can do it this way, or we can just use the keyword. What does this do? So what does this do? The keyword initialize the object. So what this does is all it's doing is whenever you use this keyword, that means the variable you're calling after this, it's coming from inside the same object. So it's coming from this file. It's not coming from anywhere else. So that means it's defined. If you go scroll up, you'll see it defined somewhere in this class. So that's what this means. So this means anything you're calling is going to be defined here. It's more readable. You don't actually have to use this keyword. This would work as well, but for simplicity and if you get used to this, when you go start working at a company, they actually do like this. So when somebody else comes in, read your code, and it's more readable, and they can understand it better. All right. So now, so we have a constructor. The user is passing in the length and the width. We can have a default constructor as well. So default constructor, what does that do? What does the default constructor do? Give basic values to fields if the user does not, exactly. So it gives values to the fields if the user doesn't pass any information to us. So that means there are no parameters, and we need to assign the values to the length and the width. And to default this, we can set it to any value we want. For this example, I'll just use 0. The length is 0, but so if you go back to main, we're going to remember we're treating this as a user class, and we create an object called rectangle, and we create rect1 equals to new rectangle. I'm able to define this just like that. I'm not passing any information. And now if I do rect1 dot, I'm able to see width and length. So I'm going to print this. So I'm going to do system dot out dot print ln, and I'll be able to see. So what would print if I 0? It'll print 0 because the default value, if the user doesn't pass any information, the default value is 0. So if I go and take this out, I'm going to take this out for a minute. I don't have a default constructor. I know if I go back here now, I'm getting a red line that you have to define the values. Otherwise, the class doesn't know what values should be assigned to width, to length, and a width. So now if I run it, I'm going to get an error because I'm not able to create my object the way this class is designed. So now I can create an object by passing in the information just like this. Try to run it again. Now the width should be 3. But if I have this in there, I can do it both ways. I don't have to pass information, and I can pass information if I have the information. If I run it again, I have the default constructor in there, and I have the other constructor. I still get 3 because depending on what parameters you're using, that's the constructor is going to use. I can add, like I said, you can have multiple constructors. So another constructor with only width. So I can add another constructor, and the user will only be passing in the width. And in this case, I can just do this dot length equals 2, and this dot width, I can just set it to whatever the user passes. So now, if I take out these two and just pass in 5, what would be printed if I run it now? Yep, so it'll be printed 5 because it's going in and using this constructor because we only have one parameter. We only have one parameter, and it's gonna the Java knows which constructor to use depending on number of parameters you're passing in. If I run it, I'll get 5. And if I'll print 0. So if I go back, remember which constructor is it using? 1, 2, or 3? So it's using 3, but the value of length would be 2, yeah. So so if I do this and run it, I should get 2 because it's using this constructor. Remember, it's only using one of these constructors, so it's not using all of them at the same time. And it determines which one it's going to use depending on how many parameters you're passing in. So it's using this one, and the default value for the length I set it to 2. That's what it is set now. So we have constructor, we have fields. Let's go ahead and add methods. So we can add get methods. Is it the same idea of overloading a method? Yes. So it's the same concept of overloading a method. Yeah. Yep. So you can have multiple methods with the same name, and you can overload with the different parameters. Yep. Is that new width in your parameter a feature of IDE using clips? So yeah. So it's a feature of the IntelliJ. So I think you're asking about this right here, Raymond. Yeah, yeah. So that's it. It goes in and gets what the name of the parameter is. So if I call this something else here, that's what would appear here. Yep. All right. So let's go ahead and add getters. Yeah. So let's go ahead and add getters and setters. So we have length and width, and I'll go ahead and quickly do this. Public. The get method will just return int get length, and all this will do is return this dot. And next we'll have public and get width and return this dot. And set works the same way, and we don't have a return value. We have just set length. And in this case, we do have a parameter coming in, and we'll just call that new. And all I'm doing is setting the new length equals to new. And same thing for the width. I have getters, get methods. So what methods can we add to rectangle? So when you think of a rectangle, what information can you get out of that? So when you draw out a rectangle, anyway, even in math class, what information do you actually need? What kind of methods can we add? Area of a rectangle. So let's go ahead and add the area method. So when the user declares it, so let's say this right here. So I'm going to do 5 and a 10. We need to find the area of this rectangle. So here we can create a method that would get the area of a rectangle. So in this case, what would be the heading of the thing? Int would be okay, and we'll just call that area. So how would you actually write this method? How do you actually calculate the area? Does anybody have the equation to calculate the area? Length times width. So to calculate the area, let's do area equals 2, and which width or which length are we going to use? It can be, let's do it this way first, and I'll show you how you can do it in a single line. Yeah. So area equals 2. What goes here? 1.get 81. Any suggestions? Any guesses? Would it be length? Yes. So it will be length. Remember, the equation is length times width. So it'll just be length times width. Or to make it more readable, where this length and width is coming from, we can just add this dot length, this dot width. No, yeah, it's just for more understanding. Once, like I said, once you get in the habit of doing this, the code is more readable to the person who's going to be working after you, or you pass the code to someone else, they can actually see what this keyword is actually doing. Yeah, so JavaScript uses a lot of this, but Java language is actually smart enough. Even if you don't type this keyword in, it actually knows where it's coming from. It's more of a readability. So now we have an area of a rectangle, and what we can do is just return that. So we can do it something like this, or we can just do return that, and we actually don't have to create a new word. So now if you come here, so one thing you should get in the habit of doing is setting your fields or attributes to private, because you do not want the user accessing them just like this. So you don't want user doing rect1.length. You want to make them go through the get function and set function. To get the area, we need to do area equals 2. And how do you actually call that function? How do you actually call this area get area function? Yeah, so I'm not going to take off points if in the assignment you don't have these set to private. But like I said, in the future, try to get in the habit of setting this to private, unless you absolutely need to make this public. Otherwise, all these fields should be private. And you want to make them go through the get method and set method instead of just calling the fields. And when you set it to private, your object is a little more secure. Okay. All right. So how do you actually call that get area function? How do you actually call dot get area? So it'll be just call that instance name. So rect1 dot get area. So remember, you have to call the instance name first and then do the get area. So you have an instance with the length of 5 and a width of 10, and you're getting the area of that, and we can just print it out and see what that's going to be. So if I run it, what should I get? So the 5 times 10 is 50, so that's what I get. So let's say I have another object. I have another instance of the same object, so rect2 equals to rectangle, and this one has 2 width, and so if I do system dot out dot println, and I do rect2, oops, excuse me. So I do area rect2 equals 2, and I can just concatenate by calling. And now I have the second instance. So this is instance 1, and this is another instance. So what would I get? So what would this print? What would line 10 print? So I know we already know what line 7 is printing. It's 50. What would line 10 print? 8. So it would print 8 because it's using the values they're giving here. So now remember, this object right here is a blueprint. We can have multiple instances, and right now we have two. So when we call rect2.getArea, rect2 refers to length and width different than what we had before. So now we have rect2 at 8 and rect1 is going to be 50. If I go and change this to this one, rect1, what would be printed? 50. Yep. So 52 times because I'm calling the same instance 2 times. So let's actually, if you guys don't have any questions, let's go ahead and create another object. So we have rectangle. There's more functions that we can add, and we can call those functions. Let's go ahead and create another object, and we'll add more functions to that. So I'm going to close this, and let's go ahead and add a date object. So I'm going to delete this, and let's go ahead and create another object called date. So I'm going to create a new class, and we'll call that date. So what should be the fields and the attributes for date? Year and month. So we can have year and month. Or to keep it simple, we can have day and a month, and we can forget about the year. So we can just have, if you have a date, the two things it actually needs is a month and a date. Day, right? Yeah. The date would include the day and the month. So the year, if we can go ahead and add the year. Yeah. So we do int. So let me actually add the fields. We have int day, and then we have int month, and we can, like I said, you can also have a year. For this example, we'll just keep it simple, and it'll just do day and month. So the constructor. So what constructors can we have? Can we have a default constructor here? If we do have a default constructor, what would that do? Not much. So if you have a default constructor, so let's go and add the default constructor. Uh, what we can do is we can set day and month to today's date. So we can call and get today's date, but it's a little complicated. So what we'll do is we'll do day equals to what's today. Today is the 10th. And just like that, and the month we'll just do, if you don't pass anything in, the default would set it to today's. And then we can have a constructor that asks the user, let the user pass his information. In this case will be new day, and then we have new, and all it's going to do is this dot day equals to month equals to new. So now if you come here and do create a date object, so date, date, I'm just gonna call it date one, and new date, and pass in, let's say January. So I did a little backwards. I'm gonna switch this, I'm sorry. So month first, and then the date like that. So January, and then we have the month is 1 and day is. All right, so now we have a date object. We have day and a month as fields. We have two constructors. One is just the default constructor if they don't pass it in, and the constructor that we'll be using most of the time, which is going to be month and a date. The user passes in, we assign it to it, assign. And what happens if you do something like this? So we have, because you don't have any control over the user, right? So if the user types this in, they're creating an object with January 32nd. Is that possible? Yeah, so we should set the fields to private. Yep, we can do that. Is this allowed? January 32nd. So that's not allowed. So this is where setting your fields to private comes in handy. Then the constructor, we can actually have that restriction in there. Oh yeah, so right now we don't have any restrictions, but we should have restrictions. It said the limit on the number of days for each month. So we can set an array for that. We can do that, or for simplicity, what we'll do is we don't want the day to go over 31, and the month we don't want it to go over 12. So yeah, so Raymond, we could do something like that, but for right now let's do just simple if statement. If new month is less than or equals to 12, I'm coming from Python, so I was trying to use that syntax. New day is less than or equals to 31, something like this. If that both of those two are true, that's when you want to set these fields. So what happens if those two are not met? So one of them is not met here. What do we want to do? We still have to assign something to we do have to construct the fields. So if that's not the case, what we'll do is we can just this dot. So what should we do? I'll just ask you guys. So I'll let you make a decision. What should we do if that's the case? If one of them is greater, remember we have to initialize the fields. The fields are not initialized yet. So we somehow needs to initialize the fields, tell the user that they're wrong. So even in that case, the solution is if you do this and dot println, and please check your date, something like this, right? If that's not the case, we tell the user to check the date, run it, get the message that please check your date. But let's go ahead and add get method. So I'm going to add public int get date, and we do return this, and then we have public int get month, and we do return this dot month. I missed a semicolon right here. All right, so I have a question here. No, I don't want to have them restart the computer. All right, so now I created an object. I go through the constructor, but here, remember, I'm not initializing any fields. So if I do this and I try to print ln and I print date one dot get day, what would happen? It'll give you an error message. Yeah, it'll give you this error message right here, the one we said, please check your date. But you'll get another error message. We're trying to get access something that is not initialized. So if we run it, my bad. So in Java, I forgot, as soon as if it's not initialized, it's automatically initialized to 0. I was thinking about a thing C++. If it's not initialized, I think you get an error message that the fields are not initialized. Never mind. Okay. So they're set to 0 automatically, but we don't want to do that. So what should we do? Remember, when they initialize the object, in their mind, even if they get this message, this instant is initialized. They can access all the methods and everything in the code. And if they do get day, instead of getting 32, they're actually getting 0. And if they have more functions in there, they're going to be doing calculations based off of everything day and month set to 0, and they're going to get wrong answers, and they'll be like, I don't know what's going on. So instead of showing them the message, what should we do? Yeah, we can throw an error. Have you guys covered error in the previous class? Like how to throw an error and all that stuff? I haven't actually taught 218 yet, so I'm not sure if you covered errors or not, or exceptions. Yeah, it's pretty simple, but I actually don't want to get into that. What we can do is we can just set okay, let me look it up how you can call that in Java. I'm forgetting the syntax. So give me just a minute. Calling default constructor. The online is just this, but I'm getting the red line. I'm sure there's a way to call the default constructor, or what we can do is just set, we can just make up the values and set it to January 1st. I'll look that up and see what's going on. How do you actually call the default constructor? You just call it by this keyword, but I'm not sure what's going on. Month, and we'll just set it to January 1st. And then we can tell the user .out.println, and we'll tell, please check your date. Right now it is set to 1. All right, so I got a question here. I think they mentioned it at one point, but I did not go in depth. Okay, that's about exceptions. So I think in this course, I'm planning on going over exceptions. So we'll have more time over going what exceptions do. They're very simple. It'll take one day to go over that. Yep. All right, perfect. All right, so there are multiple things we can do to fix this, but for time's sake, I'll try to keep it simple and just set it to January 1st. Okay. All right, anything else? So we have this, we have that, and we can set January 1st. And then if you run it, we get day, and day should be 31. So this works, the object works, we have get methods. We don't have set methods, we can add the set methods. It's pretty simple. And we do set day, and we pass in new day, just like this. And all we're doing is this dot day equals to new day. And the same thing, set month, this dot month equals to new minus. So far, so okay. We got get method, set methods. We have a default constructor. We have a constructor that takes parameter, and we are restricting those in there. We can have the same thing for the get, for the set methods. We want to restrict them. So same restriction. We want to do if new day is less than or equal to 31, go ahead and set it. Otherwise, don't set it. Same thing here. If new month is less than or equal to 12, so this is one of the reasons you want to have set methods and get methods, and set the fields to private. You want to be able to restrict the user what they set it to. If you don't have set methods and you don't have the private fields, the user can set to date to 100 and you don't have any restrictions over that. They can just do date one dot day equals to 100. And then there's no restriction on that. So that's why you want to make them go through the set methods and get methods, so they don't change your object or anything like that. So that's actually a good point. We don't have any restrictions for the user to not for them be not able to do the negative numbers. We could add that in there. And I actually don't want to do that right now because we're a little behind on time. But I wanted to get into this just to show you why is it important to use set methods and get method to be able to set the restrictions. But yeah, so you can have another restriction here that the new day needs to be greater than how would you do that? And you would just do new day is greater than 0. And same thing for month, you would come in here and just add that. There's quite a bit of work we have to get to this. Yeah. So yeah, like Raymond said, there's a lot of work that if you wanted this to be perfect, there's a lot more work we need to do. But for this example and for time's sake, we'll just leave it at this for right now. There are a lot more restrictions, a lot more methods you can add. So one method I do want to add for this class would be how would you get days in a month? So days in a month would be, let's say they pass in, the date is January 19th. And if they call days in a month, they'll get 31. So in January, it's 31 days in that month. Yeah, we can use that array method, array idea. So let me actually make that clear. So we have days in, not a month, days in month, the one current month that we're on. So this would actually returns the number of days in the date object according to the month we are on. It returns number of days in the date object according to the month we are on. So the month would be this month right here. Whatever this month is, we're going to return how many days in that month. So days in the month. So January has 31, February has 28. Let's not do the leap year. And then we have 31, then we have 30, 31, 30, 30, goes back and forth. So Raymond had an idea earlier that we can set an array. So we can create an array. So we have array of, let's call that days list equals 2. And how many elements would we have? So yeah, there you go. So we would have these values. So 1 for each of the month. So I'm going to copy this and paste it here. So we would have 31 for January. This would be February. This would be March, April, May, June, and July, August, September, October, November, December. So I think December is 31. And then we have November is 30, October is 31st, and September is 30, and August is 31, and June, January, February, March, April, May, June, July. So can somebody check how many days in June? Okay, 30, and then July has 31, and I think August has 31 also. Is that correct? Perfect. So I think we got this right. So we're not actually caring about a leap year. So this is going to stay 28. 30 in September, April, June. Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, I think we got this right. So now all we need to do is which month we are on. We're going to return that number of days. We're going to return that element. And how would we do that? So how would we get to that number of days? So let's say the date is set to, right now it's set it to May 30. And now we need to set 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this we should return 30th. So instead of 30th, let me set the date to 15. And we want to know how many days in that month. So days list month minus 1. So what would that do? You're saying days, so we'll do days, and you're saying something like days list and return month minus 1. So that would give me how many days in that month. And we can just return this, return days. Would that work? Or do we need any kind of loop? So let's test this out if this is going to work. So we have days list. That's the days list. We set each element to each month in a year. So we have January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December. And based off what the month is, we're going to return that element. Remember, this is 0 index. This is actually 0 index. So the month starts at 1. So let's say we have month at 5. We want to do 5 minus 1, 4. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I'm sorry. So month is 5. We're returning 4. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So May 31st, I'm sorry. So it is going to return 31. Confuse myself a little. All right, so now if you go back and I'm going to call this days in a month, and I call that function date days in month. So it's going to give me 31 because May, this is May. May has 31 days. So if I run it, I should get 31. If I go and change this to November, and November should give me, so November has 30. It goes in and gets this value right here because that's the November. If I go and change this to February, I should get 28.